Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode number 66 for April 15th, 2010. Super Mega Hyper Turbo Core Mode Technology.
This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Squarespace.com, the fast and easy way to publish a high-quality website or blog. For a free trial and 10% off your new account, use the offer code TWITCH at Squarespace.com. And by Audible.com. For your free audiobook, go to audiblepodcasts.com/Twitch.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. This is episode number 66. I'm your host, Ryan Shrout, joined by Colleen. And in this show, we'd like to walk you through what is news, what is cool, what is hip in the world of computer hardware. Can you actually have stuff that's hip in computer hardware, Colleen?
I don't know. I think you can, but I'm also kind of crazy. I just got back from NAB. There was a lot of really hip stuff there. Maybe
we aren't the best people to judge hip in the most general sense, but I think for techies, guys and gals that are listening to this show, I think maybe hip is the correct term. What was cool that you saw at NAB?
Oh, all the new Adobe CS5 stuff. Their GPU computing efforts with the Mercury engine. And it's Mercury, right? That's the brand name?
Mercury engine, yes.
And saw a lot of really cool live streaming encoders. I saw some really amazing technology for 3D recording. I did not see very good 3D display technology. The active shutter glasses.
Glass is free, you mean?
No, you know, I was not impressed by, for example, Panasonic's shutter glasses. They didn't create a very good 3D effect. I just got off a plane and went to bed and then woke up and drove to work, and now I'm doing the show, so I'm so tired. Oh, the new TriCaster XD850, which has basically all of the graphics being generated on the GPU as well. Uses an Halo 4-core processor, has 8 SDI inputs. Tons of AES inputs are done in power supplies, rack mountable, multi-view out.
$250?
No, you need to add 2 more zeros to that, I believe.
Damn. Okay, it was worth a shot. I was trying.
So a lot of really cool high-end broadcast stuff. What I find the most interesting is the stuff that's a little bit more down market. So
cool. Well, it sounds like you had fun, if nothing else, right?
I had
a day and a half in Las Vegas. Is that where it was?
Yeah, I was just running around. My feet hurt so much.
Yeah, I know that feeling as well. I did want to bring up a quick note for next week's episode of Twitch. We will be having a special guest. We'll see how we go from there. Patrick Norton will be joining us.
Oh, the illustrious Patrick Norton, former host of the Screensavers, host of Techzilla.
Yes, I think most people who listen to this know who he is. I think we'll have some interesting things to talk about next week, and he'll add a unique spin on the world of hardware as well. We are changing the recording time. Instead of Wednesday at, what time is it there? 3 o'clock Pacific time. I believe we're recording at 5:30 Pacific time, but on Tuesday. This is a one-time deal for now. We'll see if that new schedule...
We'll see if it works out. We'll see if he's interested, see if he likes us, see if he has fun. Maybe he'll become a recurring guest, ideally.
Yeah, if you're interested in, we might be talking about some crazy things like liquid nitrogen cooling and dry ice cooling on processors and that kind of stuff. That was one of the topics we might be bringing up next week to play around with. So
that's kind of his unique specialty, is the insanity end of computers.
Yeah. I think it'll be a fun addition. But we do have a good amount of things to talk about today, and I think we would be doing a disservice to everyone to not at least start with the new MacBook Pro hardware that was announced earlier in the week. As far as I can tell, the physical appearance didn't change, right? I mean,
no, it's pretty in the sense of it's the same exact thing, but they've just upgraded all the features with all the things that it was missing that, you know, the PC world had gotten 3-4 weeks ahead of them.
Oh, 3 or 4 months almost.
No,
well,
I mean, like Dell just did their big update to the Core i5 mobile processors.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess for those major guys bringing it out. Yeah, but it was announced in, I want to say early January, right around CES time. So
yeah, it was announced, and also there were people like Asus who integrated it sooner. But you know, I'm talking about like the actual competitors to
Dell, Lenovo, those guys. Yeah. That change we're talking about, I guess I should mention, is the move from Core 2 Duo processors to the Arendelle-based Core i5 and Core i7 processors. I say that, but the MacBook Pro 13-inch sticks with the Core 2 Duo processor. The 15-inch and the 17-inch models both have options of Core i5 or Core i7 CPUs. One of the questions I have been getting a lot already is, what is the difference between the Core i5 and the Core i7 CPUs in the mobile world? And in honesty, you get a difference of, let's see, the Core i5s have 3 megs of L2 cache, whereas the i7s have 4 megs of L2 cache. Other than that, I mean, all of them are dual-core quad-thread processors. All of them have integrated graphics, Intel HD graphics on the chip itself. Other than that, you're looking at clock speeds and what your turbo frequencies are. So the Intel automatic overclocking options that you see there. Other than that, I mean, they're essentially the same except for, you know, performance you're going to get out of them. In general, the like for instance, let's see. I guess I can actually go to the Apple website and see what the options are. So like on the 15-inch, you can configure either Core i5 runs at 2.4, 2.53, or Core i7 at 2.66. And other than that, those are the differences you'll see in terms of processor technology. Now, we got to remember these are the Arendelle parts, right? So these have integrated Intel HD graphics on the chip. So instead of having integrated graphics on the chipset, you have integrated graphics on the processor. And that's important because
it will... Is this on the silicon or on the substrate? On
the substrate. The Arendelle part has a 32 nanometer processor core and a 45 nanometer GPU and memory controller on the same substrate. So 2 different chips on the same package. So that's the differentiation there. To the end user, it shouldn't really matter. Performance differences between having the memory controller and that kind of stuff on chip versus on substrate are basically nil for most users. So what's interesting here, though, is that by having the integrated graphics on the CPU, you have the potential of better battery life, improved efficiency and performance in that respect. Not improved performance graphically, but in terms of battery life. Remember the previous, I guess we can use the current Core or the current Core 2 13-inch system because it still lives in the same world. All of the previous MacBooks, the one that I'm using here on this show that kind of runs the video, actually has an Nvidia chipset in it. So it's an Nvidia CoreLogic chipset. Front side bus connects to the Core 2 Duo processor. With the Core i5 and i7 models that were just announced, Intel chipsets only, but they do have Nvidia discrete graphics. I believe the exact model is the 330M. Yeah, GeForce GT 330M graphics. Not wildly fast graphics, not wildly improved. Don't be, kind of fooled by the rebranding structure of going from a 200 series to a 300 series or anything like that. These are still, much better performing than the Intel HD graphics when it comes to games and that kind of stuff, but they're not, they're not as fast as, say, the Mobility GTX 260 or 280 that you can get on the PC side of things. But what is interesting with these 15-inch and 17-inch models is that Apple has integrated what they are calling automatic graphics switching technology.
Is this Optimus?
It's similar to Optimus. When I first saw this, I assumed it was Optimus. And I think most people, when they first saw, here's Apple announcing a new notebook that uses Arendelle processors, uses NVIDIA discrete graphics, and there's something called automatic graphics switching technology. Apple says that it is not Optimus technology, and NVIDIA says that it is not Optimus technology, that it's something a little bit different. And even they say NVIDIA themselves don't seem to know exactly how different it is than what they're doing. I think at this point they're just happy that NVIDIA's chips are in the systems.
Well, I mean, NVIDIA's reason to produce Optimus was to sell more GPUs. Right. They bought the GPUs already. Who cares?
Exactly. It's a
means to an end. It's like, you know, if they sell you the car, they don't care whose drivers you actually use.
Right. And it's interesting. We were trying to figure out what exactly would make it different than Optimus. So if you remember, Optimus was this kind of seamless switching technology for Windows PCs, and Windows notebooks, rather, that we saw in the kind of January, February timeframe as well, where a notebook could switch between using the integrated graphics, whether that be on the chip or on die, on substrate with Arendelle, or just a regular 945G chipset type setup, that the system would be able to switch between that integrated setup and the discrete NVIDIA chip graphics, the discrete NVIDIA graphics that are also in the system, kind of on the fly, based on what applications you're using and all that kind of thing. And we assumed, I think we've talked about many times on here, that what Apple was waiting for in their release of new notebooks based on the Arendelle part and the updated Core i5, Core i7 architecture was getting that switchable graphics technology on par. Right, we assumed that they were, but maybe what was happening was NVIDIA and Apple were working together to get Optimus running. Apparently that wasn't the case. What was happening was Apple needed to get their own version of it working. And when they talk about it, it is essentially the same thing. They're using a software to dynamically power on the discrete graphics card when it's necessary based on the software being run. So it sounds pretty much identical, although they do claim, I was reading an Ars Technica article just today where they try to elaborate on the differences between Optimus and whatever Apple has created. They didn't put a brand on it, but they're switchable technology. And they say that there's two differences. The first one being that the switching is all handled automatically by Mac OS X without any user intervention. I think that's a bogus claim that it's different, because the user doesn't have any interaction on an Optimus system either. And instead of the Windows controlling it, it's a Windows driver. It's NVIDIA's driver controlling it. So in my mind, they're both software controlled. They don't require any user intervention. So that's good on both sides. The second way that Ars Technica said that Ars Technica is reporting that Apple said it was different is that the integrated graphics are powered down when the discrete GPU is active, and thus it saves more power than Optimus does. We don't have any way to really verify this. It's one of those very difficult claims. I did talk with NVIDIA. They said in their implementation with Optimus, the GPU is not, the just integrated GPU is not completely shut down, because they have to use at least a portion of it to access the frame buffer through it. But it's probably 10 to 15% of its normal power consumption for the discrete or for the integrated graphics. So my guess is that these two technologies are very similar. I did get, when we first wrote the article, we had, it's using Optimus technology, and we got several people saying, I'm not sure it uses Optimus technology, maybe you should look into it. So that's when we kind of went and did some research and found that it wasn't really the case. So I don't think it really matters in the end what anybody calls it, as long as we get past the era of having to hit a button or close all your applications and log out of your system in order to switch between discrete and integrated graphics modes. That's really what we need to get to universally across all machines. I think Optimus from NVIDIA makes that a viable goal. It will be there very soon, and I think what Apple has done with their seamless switching technology will basically essentially do the exact same thing. So
good. Do you think that there's a chance, NVIDIA or someone like that could come out with a GPU that is equally as efficient at running at low-level operations like an integrated graphics card, but when a more complicated program runs, that it ramps up more cores and then executes it quicker without having to actually have two separate processors? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. So would there be a time where NVIDIA or ATI could come out with a GPU that would kind of negate the need for an integrated graphics solution?
Yeah, there's no reason really to have two of them. Ideally, you just have, turn off a bunch of cores on the NVIDIA GPU or something.
I would tell you that it would be technically possible to do so. We have seen big strides in idle power consumption, even on, if we look at like the HD 5870.
Yeah, we call it the 480 GTX 480. That's a very efficient card.
Yeah. But if you look at like even the GTX 480 wasn't that great, but the 285 and the 5870, in terms of their idle power consumption when they're not doing any work, we have made big strides in that. It used to take 100 watts of power even when the GPU is just sitting there. The Radeon HD 5870 now takes like 18 to 22 watts of power when it's just sitting there. Obviously, that's way too much for a notebook. But I think technically it would be possible to do what you're asking, where NVIDIA could make a GPU that is both powerful and extremely power efficient when it can be or when it should be. The problem is that as we see the integration of all these components,
right? I mean, Intel's just going to keep selling chips that do both graphics and CPU functionality, and so they need a way to stay relevant in this political and market spectrum, even if technically it's not an issue.
Right. So I think what you're going to see is you're not going to see any processors sold that don't have integrated graphics anymore. You know, when AMD's Fusion parts are released either late this year or early 2011, they will also include integrated graphics. They will be better performing than Intel's integrated graphics, but we'll have to see how they land exactly when it comes out. But I don't think you'll be seeing CPUs sold without graphics in it. So it is up to NVIDIA, who is the only company as of today that does not have a processor brand and product associated with their GPU, to figure out a way to survive, to figure out a way to stay relevant, to figure out a way to one-up the competitors in terms of options, features, performance, something like that. So while I think it's technically possible, I don't, at this point, is it really even... It's
not going to be a reality because of business and marketing.
Right.
Markets, not marketing.
Right. Because of markets and because of these decisions. I mean, it's not a coincidence that Intel's doing that, right? I mean, they're doing it because they want to be able to sell one chip to one reseller or to one OEM and say, here's your whole thing. You don't have to buy anything from anybody else. We get an extra $10 out of it than we would have otherwise. And Intel... And
they also reduce the power of, NVIDIA to make chipsets and graphics and...
Yes, they did. They did a very good job of that. And actually, interestingly, the 13-inch MacBook Pro has the last NVIDIA chipset we will probably ever see in it. And it's very quiet release. It uses the MCP89, which has never been released into a system before. Just a slightly upgraded version of what is in all the the previous generation of MacBooks, the MCP79. Otherwise known as the 9400M type of thing. So this, I mean, it's the last chipset we'll see, and they could do that because the 13-inch notebook uses the Core 2 Duo processors. So they still had the bus license for all that. So, but NVIDIA didn't make a big deal out of it. I'm sure it's because they didn't want to have to answer questions about this being their last chipset and their exit out of the chipset business.
And that's
essentially.
A Core 2 processor in the 13-inch.
Yeah, the 13-inch MacBook. The new
and it will
one.
Stay that way.
I mean, they just announced this whole new line, including a 13, 15, and 17. And the 13 has the Core 2 Duo. Yes.
Oh, that's a huge disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, I think some people will be disappointed in it for sure, because you can find Core i5 and i7 processors in 13-inch notebooks.
Absolutely.
In the Windows world, right?
With Optimus, Asus did it.
Right. Yeah, and I'm looking at the website right now just to double check, and there's no way to change the processor, obviously, because you have to change the whole platform. But yeah, they stuck with the Core 2 Duo processor in the 13-inch notebook, and thus we get to see NVIDIA's last chipset. If they had gone the 13-inch route with the Core i5 line, we wouldn't have seen NVIDIA's chipset in there. We may have never seen MCP89 see the light of day.
Should we hold a goodbye party for NVIDIA chipsets?
Yeah, I think we should. We should have cake and ice cream. Invite everybody from that team.
We loved you. You were
not
wonderful.
already been fired, unfortunately.
In a completely, nearly indistinguishable sort of way.
We do have some more interesting things to talk about, including AMD's answer to turbo. What do they call theirs? Turbo frequency. I can't remember now. But we have AMD's answer to automatic overclocking coming up in their future processors, as well as some news about Intel's chipsets. But first, I want to talk about one of today's sponsors. That would be Audible.com. They are the leading provider of audiobooks with more than 60,000 titles, downloadable titles across all types of literature, including fiction, nonfiction, and periodicals. For listeners of Twitch, Audible is offering a free audiobook to give you a chance to try out their service. All you have to do is go to audiblepodcast.com/Twitch, say it again, sign up there. You get an audiobook of your choice, completely free, select from any of their titles or most of their titles, and you get to keep it no matter whether you decide to stay with the service or not. One of the ones that I'm going to recommend, I seem to have gone down a list of Malcolm Gladwell's offerings, so forgive me if you've already read this one, but if you haven't, Outliers, as well as I think I've previously recommended The Tipping Point and maybe even Blink. But Outliers is titled Outliers, The Story of Success, and it is details why very successful people become very successful and while other equally smart people do not thrive. And if there's a secret to the sensational achievements of the Beatles, Bill Gates, and the businessmen who were born in the 1830s but not the 1840s. It's a really, really interesting book. Have you read any of Malcolm Gladwell's books before, Colleen? Because I know they all
I keep having them suggested to me, but I haven't yet.
They're all very, once you read a chapter or two, you find yourself that you have to finish the book because you need to see how other kind of crazy connections he's able to make between pieces of data. But Outliers is definitely one of the classic examples of audiobook literature. So if you want to get your free download from Audible, just go to audiblepodcast.com/Twitch, and we thank them for their support. Now, let's talk about AMD's Turbo Core Technology. It sounds cool, doesn't it?
It sounds really cool. I mean, when you open up the marketing book for any, semiconductor company, you see words core, turbo, fast, hyper, ultra, mega, multi, threads, net, and then you just kind of see in what ways you can combine those terms to make a new brand name that's completely meaningless but has not been used before.
Well, they weren't able to accomplish that because we were left with Turbo Core again, but the effect and the feature are still positive. This is something that we want. The Intel Turbo mode, as I guess we're still calling it. I guess let me double check here. Turbo mode, turbo frequencies, something like that. What it essentially allows you to do is if fewer than all of the cores on the processor are being run, are being stressed, are being loaded with computing, if you're not running applications on all of them, then it will increase the clock speed of the remaining cores in order to improve performance. With Intel, for example, if you're running one core, you'll get maybe 333 megahertz faster. With two cores, you might get 266 megahertz faster, and maybe with all four cores, you can just get 133 megahertz boost. Something to that effect. What AMD's Turbo Core Technology is doing. Turbo CUDA, that's wrong mix of companies there.
Turbo CUDA Super Pipe.
But what they're doing is much less granular than that. It's pretty much an on-off switch. So this will be a new feature first introduced on the upcoming 6-core processors from AMD. And basically what it does is when all 6 cores are not in use, when up to 3 of them are, when this feature will be enabled when there are as many as 3 processors in use, it will overclock the clock speed by as much as 500 megahertz.
So what is the use case for this, though? Because if I'm using Chrome, for example, all my tabs are running in separate processes, which means that the operating system can then spread those across all the cores, yes?
It can, yes.
Automatically.
It can, yes.
Would the operating system, who balances between having fewer, faster cores and more slower cores? The operating system?
It's a mix of both the operating system and the hardware. So what the operating system, in this case, we'll assume Windows 7, has to be smart enough to do is realize that it is more efficient to, even though your different tabs are running in different threads, to run those threads on the same CPU core than it would be to turn on another core, right? So the assumption here is that
but
one
that takes
thread
a software
of CAD,
awareness of this technology.
It takes not really, because the operating system doesn't need to know exactly what the processor is doing or how many cores are there. It just needs to say, okay, this processor core that exists is kind of getting loaded. It would be more efficient for me now to move it to one of the free ones, right? And then the hardware will make the decision and says, oh, okay, now we're using 2 cores. Can I still keep the processor up higher? Yes, I can, within our thermal limits. Yes, I can. So then maybe you start playing back in HD video. Yes, we can. Maybe you start playing back in HD video. That obviously opens up, starts using a 3rd core, right? Now the processor says, 3 cores. No, we're still okay in thermals here. Maybe you open up, I don't know, you're playing a game or something as well. Something else intensive that is powerful enough that needs to use another core. So now if someone's using 4 cores, the processor says, we might be getting close to our thermal limits here. Let's step down to our base clock speed. Now, what's interesting here is the difference between what AMD Turbo Core does and what Intel's Turbo Mode does. Turbo Mode is much more intelligent. It has multiple steps. You'll see, like when you look at Intel's spec sheets for a processor, for example, the Intel Core i7-620M mobility Arendelle part has a base clock speed of 2.66. Its turbo frequency is up to 3.33. And so depending on how many threads are being loaded, how hot the processor is, that frequency will range anywhere between 2.66 and 3.33 gigahertz. With AMD's, it's much more cut and dry. It's basically you cross the line, you're going back to the base clock speed. You stay below that line and we'll increase it up to 400 or 500 megahertz. Now that difference will be based on how fastly or how quickly bend the processor core actually is, how fast it can run. So they'll kind of hard set a limit of, for example, a theoretical 6 core that runs at 3.2 gigahertz will run at 3.2 gigahertz when there's 4, 5, or 6 cores being run. But when there's 1, 2, or 3, it'll run at 3.6 gigahertz. So now, 400 megahertz boost. That's pretty significant. But
yeah, absolutely. That's a huge.
Yeah.
And for games, for example, that don't properly take advantage of having 4 or even 6 cores, it's better to have the higher clock speeds, and it's going to be perfectly relevant to a lot of people.
Exactly.
But I think let's be honest, let's regress this back to the reptilian brain for a second. They should really put a button and a light on the computer, and when it switches into the turbo mode, I want a red LED to come on.
Okay, why do you want that?
Because it's in turbo mode. It's awesome. It's faster.
I see. Maybe you want it to flash and maybe have the spinning light with it as well.
I want to know that the boost is on.
I'm sure that would be an easily creatable hack that we could figure that out. Wouldn't be a problem at all.
Or maybe a little button on the outside where I can hit turbo and.
So, for now, this feature will only be coming to the new 6-core AMD parts. That will the 6-core desktop parts that'll be out. Maybe later this month, maybe in early May. I can't remember exactly, but it is. It's kind of their answer to it. It's a little bit more simplified because it was one of those things where they had to add in later, just like Nvidia is adding in multiple monitor gaming support. Is not as smooth of a is just because of once I was playing catch up. So. Either way. Right. I did want to mention, I think we might have mentioned this before. We've talked about Intel chipsets.
Yes.
We're talking about for the desktop here. P55 is the most recent one. X58 is the current high-end chipset.
Which is what I have in my system with my Core i7 and my 3 channels of DDR3 RAM and
correct.
SLI and compatibility with ATI's multi-GPU solution, which is, I'm blanking on the name, don't say it. Damn you! I said don't say it.
Well, I said it before you said don't, so I can't. But yeah, you need that chipset, the one that you have, Colleen, the X58, in order to run, true 3-way SLI to get the best possible performance, to have the most PCI Express lanes, all that kind of stuff. P55 was released for the Linfield processor back
which
in
has a DMI,
September.
not a QPI interface between the chip and the PCI Express.
And that's because the PCI Express lanes are actually built into the processor on that chip, whereas in the LGA 1366 CPUs, the PCI Express lanes are all still in the chipset. So that's a difference. Now, what's interesting here is that I think I've mentioned before here that Intel doesn't plan on releasing any new desktop chipsets for the rest of 2010. And the reason that is a disappointment, and the reason I think people should care that Intel's not doing that, is because you have SATA 6 and USB 3.0. These are traditionally chipset implemented features.
Right.
You know, you buy a new motherboard and they're based on the chipset, and that's how you get access to these new features.
Not required.
Not required. Not at all. But essentially what Intel is saying here is that we're not going to have USB 3 or SATA 6G support in any of our platforms until at least 2011. And we're starting to hear rumblings about a chipset release in Q1 of 2011 for the 6 series, I guess they're going to call it H67, P67. No mention of an X68 anywhere in here yet, although it wouldn't surprise me that actually comes to pass. We also are not seeing any information yet on whether or not these new chipsets in Q1 will actually have SATA 6 or USB 3.0 support in them. I think if Intel were to release a platform that does not have those features as late as next January or February or March, would be a real shame. I mean, it'd be a real disservice to the community of PC users in general, not just gamers, not just enthusiasts, but
would you like to give
PC
them a wag
users.
of your finger?
I can't give them a wag of my finger yet because I don't know.
I don't know. You got fingers and a camera.
I guess I can. I still can because I really think that they should be pushing the platform features forward sooner than they are. Assuming that they come out in January of 2011, the fact that all of 2010 will have come out without a true update to their chipsets is really, really disappointing. This does mean that if you want an Intel-based platform, you're going to have to get one of those motherboards that has third-party USB 3 and SATA 6 controllers on it. Not a big deal. There's a lot of them out there. Asus makes them, Gigabyte, MSI, all the major motherboard manufacturers make motherboards that have USB 3.0 and SATA 6G on them already. But it's one of those things, most system builders, most OEMs, they're not really accepting of new technologies until Intel implements them on their own first-party chipsets. So hopefully this won't hold back those two technologies because I think they're really important to the enthusiast and the consumer in general.
I think most might be an overstatement. I think, you'll be able to get it in, workstation class laptops from Lenovo and Dell and people like that.
All using third-party chips.
Right. That's what I mean, though. They'll go out of their way and they'll put it in there.
I think the average consumer can really benefit.
And they'll accept it, but
3.0,
it's ideal that it's included in the chipset from Intel.
I just think the average consumer will see a benefit from USB 3.0.
Absolutely,
Moving
I completely
pictures
agree.
from camera, I mean that is about as basic as task as you can get. Something my mother does with her laptop, right? And that would see a significant performance boost with USB 3 as opposed to USB 2.0.
I saw at NAB this really cool new Intensity card. Actually, it's an external box from Blackmagic that is only $200. And using USB 3.0, you are able to capture HDMI high definition right into your USB interface.
That's
and
pretty
it's
cool.
direct show compatible. So I could use this, for example, to stream Twit in HD once we get an HD TriCaster and HD cameras with USB 3.0 compatible computers if I wanted. This is not how I'm going to do it, probably, but it's just an example. And that's a super cheap, easy external part for capturing high definition. That's a perfect example of what USB 3.0 can give to consumers.
Right. And I think we'll see more implementations of that kind of stuff sooner had Intel decided to really push the technology. I mean, they were the big pusher behind USB 2.0, right? And we saw how quickly those kind of snowballed. And now we had this big, long gap, I think of 8 or 10 years where USB 2.0 was dominant. And just now are we starting to get the replacement, and it's a little bit slower than I would have hoped. But
not the speed of the interface, but the speed of the adoption.
Yeah, true. The speed of the interface is great. Love it. Fantastic. So Looking forward to that. Let's take a moment real quick, talk about our second sponsor for today. That would be Squarespace. Squarespace.com is the fast and easy way to publish a high-quality website or blog. It has an easy-to-use user interface for creating and managing a website or blog. It's optimized for both beginners and CSS experts. So if you like to get into the nitty-gritty of how your website looks and adjusting things in CSS, you're able to do that. Or if you just want the really simplified version of pick a couple of templates and make some minor modifications, you can do that really easily. There are hundreds of those design templates to choose from, and you can start there and customize any way to fit your needs. It is an all-inclusive service that includes modules to help build your website. It's got a blog module, forum, photo gallery, form builders, Google Maps, all that kind of stuff. It is also hosting, so you don't have to worry about getting like a Drupal system and then finding a server host for it or anything like that. This is all in one. You got your hardware and your software all in one service, and it's all really well optimized and put together. It has a cloud architecture in that front for speed and site stability. So if you get a whole lot of traffic, it will spawn new web services for you.
For example, if your website is shown on Twit Live, and all of a sudden everyone hits your servers, and
a perfect example.
You don't want it to go down because that's your moment.
That's your moment of fame. That's, if you're building a business website, that's your moment where you can make a lot of money and sell a lot of product, and you don't want your hardware going down or your site going down at that point. I know that from experience. When an article gets on Dig or Slashdot, that's when you want people to be able to access it, because that means you have good content. You don't want them to get server non-responding errors. So you can use Squarespace for all of your website building needs, build, host, manage. For a free trial of this, all you have to do is go to squarespace.com. You don't need a credit card to try it out and build your website to get this free trial. And then when you decide you want to stick with them, if you use the offer code TWICH, TWICH, you get 10% off of your order when you make the decision to stick with them, which I think you are going to like it. So again, that URL is squarespace.com, and we thank them for their support as well. I do have something I think you'll be interested in learning about. I know you still were not as big a fan of Eyefinity Technology as I wanted you to be, Colleen.
I wanted to like it so much.
I know you did. I know you did. That's why I'm not even mad at you. It's because I know you wanted, and you tried. You tried.
I tried twice.
You tried twice. This might make you try a third time, though. This is a card I saw last weekend. Ken and I spent a day with 9 of the country's best overclockers at an Asus event where they're using liquid nitrogen cooling, and they're trying to break world records on all kinds of different benchmarks. One of the things Asus also showed me while we were there.
We should get some of those guys on the show, by the way.
I think we can do that. I think that would be fun to do. Maybe, yeah. Because we'll talk with Patrick next week about his experience with dry ice cooling, which is still very different than liquid nitrogen, but still in that realm of super crazy
Cold stuff. Go faster.
Yeah. So this card you're showing a picture of is the Asus Ares graphics card. Now, what's interesting here is it's a dual GPU Radeon HD 5870 card. So there are two 5870 GPUs on it.
That's wicked.
And the HD 5970 already has 2 of these GPUs on here, but these are running at full clock speed, slightly overclocked actually, on both the GPU and memory over a single 5870 card that has 4 gigs of memory, 2 gigs per GPU. And if you look kind of closely right there, yeah, that one right there, it takes a lot of power. 3
power connectors. There's
it has 2
8-pins and 1 6-pin.
Yeah, that's a lot of juice. I think I talked to one of their engineers later, one of their product managers later in the day, and it uses about 60 watts more than the 5970. So that will take it. Obviously, it required them to put the extra power connector on there. It also means that it will probably be. It will definitely use more power than even the GTX 480 does at this point, based on the cabling connections we can see there. But the performance on it was really, really good. I had time to run one quick benchmark on the system while it was installed, and it was on 3D Mark Vantage, not usually our favorite benchmark, but one that was quickly could run it and is reliable. It had a GPU score of 28,400 and something, while the GTX 480 was 17,200 and something. So we're talking about 30% more over any other single graphics card available. So that's pretty impressive. Now, I don't know what it's going to cost yet. It's going to be expensive. I do know that. I think their plan is to limit it to like 1,000 cards built worldwide, something to that effect. So if you're a budget-minded gamer, just don't even bother looking for one of these. I would expect them to be available late May, early June, right around the Computex timeframe, which is the big show in Taiwan. So that would be the time. If you've got the money, if you're looking for a way to spend it, that would be the time to start the hunt for one of these 1,000 limited edition run graphics cards.
So where are we going? You started off with Infinity, right?
Oh, well, I just meant here's another reason why you want to push 3 monitors, 3 30-inch monitors as fast as you can. This is the single graphics card that's going to do it.
Okay, I'll give you that. But one, it looks like the DVI Dual Link is going straight into the back. So I'm not sure it even does 3 monitors.
It definitely does 3 monitors. So it doesn't do 6. Is what it.
Sorry,
it's not,
okay.
It's not the
That's yeah. So I could do 3. I couldn't do 6. I could do 2
Correct.
Dual Link DVI displays and then a active adapter if I have a 30-inch, passive if I have anything else, to go from DisplayPort to DVI.
That is
I could run 3, but it would still do the deal breaker of fisheyeing it, right?
Yeah, I mean this card's not going to change any of the software issues that you may.
Got me all
have
excited.
had, but
you lead it off with Infinity, and all it is numbers. Numbers.
It will run the fisheye much faster.
Ooh, very high quality fisheyes. Very popular in Japan.
More games are being adapted to that, so I think we'll see that improved. Did you see the little video that I had where we showed StarCraft 2 playing on the 6 displays?
No, but I will definitely look for it.
Yeah, check that out. There's a video on the website there.
I've been playing StarCraft 2 a little bit, by the way.
Somebody gave you an account, huh?
No, Sunken Planet gave me his username and password to try it out when he's not using it.
Be careful. Don't get in trouble with that. I know how that runs. So.
Okay, that's not allowed. Marking that for an edit point. Didn't know
What's that?
I did nothing. No, anyway. So I've been playing StarCraft 2 and getting my ass kicked. I suspect there's a lot of Koreans playing.
Yeah,
I want them to have their own league. They can be professional tees.
Leave us alone.
And the Americans can play from the ladies' tees.
Agreed.
Speaking of golf, what did you think of the 3D Masters?
I liked it actually. Did you ever give it a shot? Did you try it out?
Yeah, you know what I did? I ran out and made time in my schedule to watch golf in 3D. You got me. Totally,
we had this discussion last week because I got the same vibe from you then that you weren't a big fan of watching golf on television, and that 3D wasn't really going to change that. So probably was the case. No, I liked it. I still thought it was cool. Hopefully anybody that had a 3D vision setup gave it a shot and tried it out since it's free. You might still be able to watch the streaming service for free, masters.com/3D. Go there. I have no idea if that still works, but if you go there, you might get the reruns, so to speak, of golf. And I bet Colleen will admit that if golf is really exciting, reruns of golf
riveting,
is
absolutely
even more riveting. Yeah.
Riveting.
All right. The last little bit of news I wanted to mention before we get into a handful of Twitter questions is about the iPad again. Just wanted to mention something. If you're building a new system, you have an iPad, you want an iPad. One of the kind of complaints that we have about that device is that you have to plug it into the wall to charge it. It won't charge through the USB port in any of your systems.
Some systems it will.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some systems it will, some systems it won't. According to many reports.
Okay.
It'll charge slowly out of some systems and not at all out of others.
I had heard that if you turn it off, it will charge in some systems. But if you leave it on, it will not charge it. I don't know. But Gigabyte announced, they sent out a press release about this that
So Houdini7 in the chat room says it will charge it if you put it to sleep.
Okay. Well, there's a whole bunch of motherboards actually from Gigabyte that I believe at CES we talked about a new feature of Gigabyte motherboards where it was extra power going through the USB ports in an intelligent manner so that if the device could handle more than the 500 milliamps of power through it, that it would send it.
Super hyperport with nuclear power.
close. It was something close to that in terms of marketing. But they showed that working with the iPad, and that you could charge the iPad both when it's awake and on, or asleep, or powered off completely. It will be able to charge it. I think in this little picture here in our news post, they show it pushing 1.24 amps out. I think that's the number I'm looking at here. So enough to charge the iPad, probably obviously slower than plugging it into the wall, I would assume. But it is able to charge it. So if you're maybe building a new system, maybe that's one of those last minute things that kind of puts you over the edge in terms of which.
If you're important or in love with your iPad. I mean, for me, I've noticed that if I wall charge my Droid, it goes really quickly, and if I charge it off of the USB port on a computer, it goes really slowly. So it's an advantage there if it'll intelligently do that too, even if you don't have an iPad.
You know, Ken actually brought a charger that has, I forget who it's from, it had 4 USB ports, and each one of them was at a different amperage. So you could plug in one device to 500 milliamps, one to 1 amp, 2 amps, and like 5 amps or something like that. I wouldn't recommend hooking anything up to the 5
I was going to say, this could end badly, I think.
That's what I thought, too. I said, I hope the average Joe doesn't buy this and accidentally
we'll let Ken try it out, see if anything bad could happen.
Exactly. All right, let's go to some of our reader, listener, viewer submitted Twitter questions. And if you want to submit these questions, what you need to do is follow me on Twitter. I am at Ryan Shrout.
Ooh,
just kind of like it says.
Well played.
And
you're a thought leader.
Usually about, I don't know, an hour or 2 hours before the show goes on live, I'll say, hey, anybody got some questions for us to answer? So that's what we did today, and let's go through a handful of what they wanted to know.
And this is the part of the show where Colleen attempts to read directly off of a computer screen rather than speaking out of her head and likes to stutter. So, Andros Lee would like to know, at Ryan Shrout, are we going to see any 6-core CPU with a lower TDP than previous Gen 4 core from AMD or Intel?
So he's asking if we'll see a 6-core part that uses less power than the currently existing 4-core parts. The answer is yes, but not yet. The only 6-core part available, like in the kind of consumer market, is the Core i7-980X. It's $1,000, $1,200 processor. It definitely is at the top TDP level. The interesting thing there is it does not exceed the TDP.
Explain TDP for a moment to the viewers at home.
Thermal dissipation performance, I believe.
Meaning I'm not hot and takes a lot of power.
So a TDP of like 140 watts or 125 watts is the maximum amount of power that a CPU can dissipate, or heat that it can dissipate, because systems and coolers are built off of those specifications. So Intel says, hey, tells all, Dell, we're going to build a new processor next year. It's going to have a max TDP of 125 watts. So Dell built all their heat sinks and systems around cooling a 125 watt processor in a system, and having it be relatively cool in that regard. So the 6-core 32 nanometer part came out at the same TDP as the 4-core 45 nanometer part. That's really actually kind of nice. It's almost expected when you say it like that, because you're going down a process node. We will see 6-core parts from AMD as well. They will not be lower than the top quad cores when we do see them later this month or early in May. We will get there eventually, but we're not there yet. I would say well before the end of this year, you will see 6-core processors running at lower power than many of the quad-core processors that we'll be selling at the same time.
All right. Jordan Patterson would like to say, or no, I'm building my first machine in a while. Is there any reason to get 6 gigabit per second on a spindle drive over a 3 if my... I think he's trying to say, is there a reason to get SATA 6G instead of USB 3.0?
No, I think he's saying SATA 6 gig spindle drive over a 3 gig spindle drive.
3 gigabyte spindle drive?
If his motherboard supports it, which is obviously one of the keys there.
So, I mean, what really matters there is the throughput of the drive itself.
Right, and so I would say no, because right now you're paying a price premium for a 6 gig, a SATA 6G spindle-based drive than you are for the same capacity in a 3 gigabit per second spindle-based drive. and I don't think it's really worth it right now. I still think for me, the real benefits of SATA 6G will come as more SSD solid state drives take advantage of it. We'll be able to see sustained reads and writes over the 300 megabyte per second mark, which is kind of the theoretical max of the SATA 3G. And to be honest with you, spindle-based drives, they could burst a little bit higher, but in terms of sustained speeds, we're still talking in the 120 to 150 megabytes per second range, so it's really not that necessary. If they're the same price, if you can find a 1.5 terabyte that's the same price at 6G or 3G speeds, by the 6G, it's not going to hurt anything, that's for sure. But I wouldn't spend money on it yet.
All right.
That's where I lay.
Geekosphere 101 would like to know if Fermi is worth the hype or underwhelming.
I would say it was not, didn't live up to the hype. Is it worth the money? That's what I'm going to go with. Is it worth the money? I think it turned out to be a fairly competitive.
I actually think he asked
card.
Right here, is it worth the hype?
Well, I'm going to have to say yes, it's worth the hype, because hype is free. You could read it or not read it, and if you can trade hype for a free graphics card, do it every time. Is it worth the money? I would say it's pretty. I think it's a really, really good option. Nobody's going to call it efficient. Nobody's going to call it a cool GPU in terms of temperature.
Not that I care about that.
Right. If you don't care, look at the reviews, look at the performance numbers, especially at PCPer.com, and see if it makes sense for you to, the GTX 480 is $499, and it's better than the AMD part at $330, but it's worse than the AMD part at $500 or $550 or $600, whatever it is. And then the same thing with the GTX 270. It kind of falls between both the price and the performance of a 5850 and a 5870. So what Nvidia did with Fermi is they made it a very, very compelling option for gamers.
Andros Lee is back. He asked
Yes.
the first question, and now he's saying, Pogo Plug, Dropbox, or Hamachi with your home computer always on? I'm guessing he wants to share files with himself wherever he is.
I'm going to be honest with you here. I'm going to lean on Colleen. I only have experience with Dropbox, and I love it. Dropbox lets you install, Dropbox on multiple computers. You share a cloud capacity on a hard drive of, like, say, 2 gigs or 50 gigs or 100 gigs, depending on if you want free or a pay service. And then, for instance, Colleen will copy some audio files into the local Dropbox folder on that machine.
When we record PC Perspective at night, I output it as an MP3 file, drop it into the Dropbox folder, and it syncs both to the cloud and then to Ryan's computer. Right,
and it syncs to my computer, it syncs to my editor's computer.
Because they're all shared. We can share our folders with each other.
Exactly. Do you have any experience with Pogo Plug or Hamachi?
Leo uses Pogo Plug. He likes it. I'm not particularly sure why he likes it over Dropbox. I think Dropbox is so easy, and the ability to share folders with people, and it's free, and you can buy more storage if you need it, or
the Pogo Plug is a piece of hardware, right?
It's a piece of hardware and a service, and Hamachi is basically a really simple zero configuration VPN solution, so that you could file share with yourself on your home network. Okay. I don't think that's as easy as Dropbox for dealing with file sharing across multiple systems. It also doesn't really work in the background. So Dropbox will automatically sync all the stuff for you, where you'd have to set up a completely separate program to be like, hey, when you're on and you have an internet connection and you can sense the other computer over the VPN, sync this folder, whereas that functionality is automatically built into Dropbox.
Yeah, I did know, at least maybe a few months ago, actually, Dropbox added local network support.
Yeah, so you can go between computers on your network really easily using that file sharing.
So very, very quickly, it will still sync to the cloud, but like if my editor and I copy a file to the Dropbox, it will automatically copy it locally, very, very quickly, and then it will still go to the cloud for access to everybody else. And, you can also access Dropbox.com or get Dropbox or whatever it is. I forget the URL.
It was Get Dropbox. Now it's Get Dropbox and Dropbox.com. There was this whole political thing with a squatter who had Dropbox.com.
Gotcha. But you can, I can be in a remote location on somebody else's computer that doesn't have Dropbox. I can log into that website and I can download files from that folder as well. So I'm going to have to go with Dropbox here.
I'm going to have to go with Dropbox here too. Pogo Plug could be good, but I have not used it, so I'm not going to recommend it. And
it's also pink.
It's also what?
It's pink. The physical item is like, it's really weird design, and it's like a pink color. I think I saw one at Fry's last week.
Well, let me check, but even if it was, I don't see that as a negative thing. Are you afraid
maybe I'm
people
pinkest?
might judge your masculinity if you have this?
Yes, exactly. If I have a pink external USB hard drive that floats above the table on a piece of plastic stand, then yeah, I feel like Dropbox is manlier.
You feel like less of a man. Okay, no, that's fair. At least you're honest about your insecurities.
Exactly.
No, I'm definitely going to go with Dropbox for ease of use for this one. Cool. Although, Hamachi also allows you to do cool things, like you could do VNC over the network or whatever. Any other, it's more low level, right, and allows you to do more stuff, but from what it looks like you're trying to do, it's not the easy way.
Okay.
All right.
Who's next?
Someone would like to know. I hate reading tweets on air. I'm going to make you start reading these questions. So this guy's name is like Soad Rock Server or something.
That's close.
How would you say that?
Soad Rock Sever.
Sever, not even server.
Yeah.
Soad Rock Sever says, at Ryan Shrout, Asus U3S6 in second PCIe X16 drops vid card to 8X. Is that going to, and then the number 2, hurt video performance? Card is HD 3850, 0.5 gigabyte DDR3 256-bit.
See, now that's a good use of 140 characters there. He got a lot of information and a question in that spot, so I'm proud of him.
You can't read this stuff on air without sounding like an asshole, though.
Well, you gotta like pre-read and translate on the fly, and then speak.
Okay, put that in the show notes next time. Do the translation.
So he has a Radeon HD 3850. It's in a 16x PCI Express slot. If he adds the Asus U3S6 card, which is cool because it has USB 3.0 and SATA 6 all in the same card, adds that functionality to your computer, he's saying it will drop both PCI Express slots to by 8, and will that affect the performance on his graphics card? And the answer is no. By 16, by 8 bandwidth, especially with a 3850, which is a couple of generations older graphics card, still fine to play a lot of games on, but it's not going to affect performance really at all. The only time you need to worry about having true by 16 bandwidth is if you're doing 3-way SLI or 3-way or 4-way crossfire, and you're talking about 2560 by 1600 resolutions, because then it's transferring a bunch of data across the bus. Single graphics card, it's only getting data to and from system memory, to and from the processor. You're not going to notice any difference going from 16 to 8 with this configuration. Plus, you get the advantage of having USB 3.0 and SATA 6G performance in your computer. So even if you got 1 or 2 or 3% performance drop, I still say it's worth it for the feature improvement.
All right. No Joke Deal on Twitter would like to know, Ryan Shrout, are ATI 5000 series video cards overkill for gaming on a Samsung 50-inch LED 1080p TV via HDMI? I'll take that one.
No. Okay, go ahead.
So, first off, the size of the TV doesn't matter, just the resolution.
Right.
The fact that it's LED doesn't matter. No,
I think it was just
not
showing
overkill.
off
What matters is, what are you trying to play? It's overkill if you're trying to run 1080p, which is a medium-high resolution. If you're trying to play World of Warcraft, yeah, it's probably overkill. 5000 series is a big series. Are we talking about the super high-end ones? Yeah, that's overkill. Low-end ones, no, not completely. I mean, yeah, you can probably max it out. But if you're playing Crysis, yeah, no, they're not overkill. Crysis will still bring your system to its knees, even with that video card at that resolution.
Agreed. The only thing I would say is, I would even say a 5870 is not overkill for this, because even though you're only running at 1920 by 1080p, you're talking about a 50-inch screen. So it doesn't really matter in terms of performance, but now we're talking about a larger image where being able to increase your anti-aliasing, anisotropic filtering, and other IQ image quality settings as high as possible will improve the image significantly over, saying, having a 5770 or something like that.
Yeah, but 1080p on a 50-inch TV is probably pretty similar in the detail that your eyes can resolve to 1080p on a computer monitor in front of you. Maybe even less.
Yeah, the level of detail is, but the problem is you're seeing if there are any defects in that image, it's being blown up to 50.
But you're sitting farther away because it's a TV.
In theory, yes. Maybe he's sitting real close. Maybe he's trying to get that 6-panel Eyefinity experience, but with one giant panel.
Well, if you are, then
if you are,
whatever.
take a couple of steps back.
Yeah.
I would still say, in general, I would say, if you can afford the computing power, if you can afford the GPU power, you can always find something to do with it. You can always increase settings. You can always increase anti-aliasing. You can always do something with it. And there are always going to be games like Metro 2033 that come out that are really hard on your GPU. So if you want to play a lot of games, you want to play some of the newer titles and that kind of stuff, I would say it's definitely not overkill. Go as far as your budget. As your budget can take you. But if you're on a tight budget, the 5770 will be able to play 1080p gaming, at reasonable image quality settings and all that kind of stuff as well, just like Colleen said. So, very cool.
All right. Thank you so much for coming, Ryan.
Hey, no problem. It's a nice short trip thanks to Skype. I just have to walk into the next room with it where the cameras are. But it was fun. So that will round up this week's episode of This Week in Computer Hardware. Don't forget, next week we will be on at a different time. Check the schedule at live.twit.tv for the live feed there. I think it will be 5:30 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday. But double check any of my numbers that I give you here.
Double check on the schedule on live.twit.tv.
Yes, exactly.
And where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Ryan Shrout. Again, that's for the questions. Also, you can see reviews and information that we talk about. A lot of this stuff we talk about here at my website, pcper.com. And of course, don't forget, you can go to twit.tv/Twitch to subscribe to the show. And you can subscribe on iTunes and Zune and all that.
And we'll be out on video and sometime soon, the next couple of weeks. We're launching a video podcast a week. I'm going to try to get Floss out this week or the beginning of next. NAB through a kink in my normal workflow.
Ooh, me next.
You'll be when it is decided.
Can I decide that?
No.
Oh,
you don't
all
get
right.
to decide. Look at you. Look at you. Seriously.
I got a shirt with a collar on. I'm a decider.
And you've got like little racing stripes coming up your armpits.
Yeah, that keeps me cool when I'm playing golf or something like that, which is very exciting.
Golf, which when you're playing in person, it's in 3D.
Exactly. And where can they find you?
Twitter.com/digitalkitty.
All right, that's going to do it for this week, guys. Thanks for listening.